Thanks, Tiffany. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us again today. My name is Alana Cadell-Tuckey. I am the Director for the Office of Environmental Justice at DEC, and I'm also the Chair for the Climate Justice Working Group. So today, what we're going to be doing is sort of beginning the process of reviewing the disadvantaged communities criteria that we finalized in March of 2023. And sort of to aid us in this process, our wonderful technical team has compiled a presentation that's going to sort of help us think through some of the things that we've already done, what changes potentially need to be made, and what we're going to be going through in the next few months. So as always, the goal is to try to keep this to the 2-hour time limit that we agreed to initially. So I don't want anybody late to anything else. I know I have another meeting after this, so I want to make sure that everything gets started. As always, for our meeting procedures, anyone who is observing this meeting, either live or via WebEx, this is a meeting of the Climate Justice Working Group. This is not a public hearing or forum. We will not be taking any testimony or questions from the public during this meeting. Only Climate Justice Working Group members are permitted to discuss, deliberate, and vote on any issues. If you're in attendance, we ask that you remain respectful of these proceedings and refrain from raising your hand or attempting to draw attention or interject in any way at any point. And again, at the closing of the proceedings, please, we ask that you exit the area. And as always, for folks on the line to reduce noise, we're going to mute the meeting rooms when people aren't talking. Please raise your hand to have your room unmuted. And since this is on WebEx, please state your name before speaking for transcription purposes. Next slide. So the agenda. So what we're going to start with, obviously, we're going to do a roll call. It's going to be a little bit sparse, but that's fine. We're not going to approve the minutes, so we're going to skip over that. Do a quick update of some of the new staff that joined us here. Do a quick recap of the criteria and the annual review process, which includes, initial considerations for the 2024 review, moving to the 2020 census data, updating the disadvantaged communities data, refining it, and then what the new potential indicators might be. And then we'll quickly discuss some next steps before we move forward. Okay, we could skip slide. We'll just go to slide 5 and we'll do a quick roll call. Okay, well, we'll skip the approval of minutes, but we can still do the roll call. So I'll do a quick roll call just to signify who's here. Myself, Alana Cadell-Tuckey. I am in New York City. Sonal.
Hi, Sonal Jessel.
And the next person I see is Abby.
Hi, Abby Mutu-Gruffa. Glad to be here.
Hi, Abby. Everyone in Albany?
Michael Duramio with NYSERDA.
Hey, this is Neil Muscatello with DOH.
Hi, Neil. Thanks for being here. Kayla, anyone in, did Rawa show up yet?
Oh, not yet. It's just me.
Okay, that's okay. And we still don't have Region 5. So,
sorry, I'm just hearing that there's some issues with the WebEx password from my colleague Elizabeth Firth.
oh,
She's struggling to
Yeah,
get in.
trying
So
to
it
get
might be happening with other people as well. I just started.
no, absolutely. There's somebody, let me see, who can help Elizabeth get in? Tiffany, are you there?
Yep, Emma's helping her get in right now.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you.
Here.
Right. So, well, that's what we have for roll call. Like I said, we're not going to have quorum today, so we won't be able to vote on any minutes or deliberate specifically on any of the points that we go over today, but we can still review and have discussion as long as we do not come to any decisions or any decision-making points. All right. Okay, next slide, please. We're going to skip the approval of minutes. All right, so just so folks know, I am very pleased to make this announcement that we have some new employees in the Office of Environmental Justice that are going to be helping us out with the disadvantaged communities criteria and with the Climate Justice Working Group. So I want to start by introducing Oliver Riley. He is new-ish to this. Oliver has been with the New York State DEC for almost 10 years now, but he is new to the Office of Environmental Justice. Prior to working for our office, he worked for the Office of Climate Change, and Oliver is our new climate policy analyst. He started in February, He has a master's in public policy from SUNY Empire State. He has a long history with DEC in different programs, and he is also a Senate Legislative Fellow for Senator Kaminsky. And essentially, he's going to be the new Disadvantaged Communities Technical Lead. He's going to assist the agency with all things Climate Justice Working Group and disadvantaged communities related, and anything else I can think to throw at him. And that includes a statewide and agency-wide implementation of disadvantaged communities criteria. So welcome, Oliver, to the team. I don't know if you're.
Hello, everyone.
Yep, and he'll be having a section where he'll be presenting pretty soon. And I also wanted to quickly introduce Ahmed Al-Balushi, who is our intern in OEJ. He's studying environmental engineering at SUNY Albany, and he's going to be working really closely with myself and with Oliver on the disadvantaged communities related work. So he's going to be a pretty regular fixture at our meetings, probably throughout the rest of the year and the duration of his internship. So hopefully everyone can make him feel welcome. Oops. All right. With all of that being said, I'm going to turn things over to Alex Dunn, who I'm sure is really eager to speak to everyone because it's been a while since we last talked to Alex. So before I turn things over to Alex, does anybody have any questions? No? Alex, take it away.
Okay, hi everyone. It's been a minute, and I'm really looking forward to getting kind of started chatting with you all again. So without further ado, I think what I'd like to do is go through all the things that we voted on last time, and just to kind of give a refresh because it has been such a long time, how we did it, what all the things are, so that then we can talk about what updates that we're making and what we're thinking. So first thing, I wanted to go through the fact that we have 45 indicators, and we have within the environmental burdens, we've got 3 different factors: potential pollution exposures, land use and facilities, and then also potential climate risks. And potential climate risks is double weighted. We have all of these different indicators within them that you all have seen at different times and look through. So next slide. Now on the population characteristics and health vulnerabilities side, that larger component score, we've got 4 factors: income, education and employment, race, ethnicity and language, health impacts and sensitivities, housing, energy, and communications. Within race, ethnicity, and language, we have a double weight on % Latino, and then we have a double weight on % Black, and then we have double weights on both of the income indicators, so % less than 80% area median income, and % less than 100% federal poverty line. And all of those are wrapped up together into the next slide. By the way, as always, ask questions if things look different or anything. So what we have done is, take all of those different indicators and put them into those factors, those major buckets. And in those buckets, then we average the kind of the score for those, and then we add those up together. Because there were only 3 buckets on the environmental burden side and 4 on the population characteristics and vulnerability side, we double weighted the climate change bucket. And then based on deliberations and discussion in response to the comments, the public comments, we changed the original approach, which was to multiply those different component scores, and we now add them together. So everything is added up. Next slide. Now this is where it gets a little crazy, because it's to balance out the number of DACs across the New York State. What we did was actually take everyone's scores, and then we created a rank that was a statewide rank. And then we also created a rank that was rest of the state versus New York City. And so we took the top X%, I think it's about 27% of each of those statewide ranks and the rest of rank, or the rest of state rank, so that we could get kind of a balance across the state. So not everything was focused totally in New York City. And that was something we discussed way early on in the process. But what it allows us to do is then create some more rural DACs. Next slide. Through a lot of deliberation, we ended up deciding on, or the Climate Justice Working Group ended up deciding on kind of designating 35% of the top scores as disadvantaged communities. What that ended up being was that there would be 1,736 out of the total 4,918 census tracts that were designated as DACs. Next slide. But that wasn't it. So that wasn't all that we did. So in essence, there are a couple like little cases where it was just a little bit different. So the 19 indigenous tribal areas were automatically included. And then there were also some tracts, 138 of them, where there wasn't enough population or health data for us to be able to calculate the human, the human dimension, the population characteristics side of things. So in that one, we had the environmental and climate data component, and we judged based on those whether they were DACs or not. So out of the 138, 53 of those were designated as a DAC. Next slide. And then on top of the geographic criteria, there was a lot of discussion last time about whether we should include individual criteria on top of the geographic DACs. And this was specifically focused on for the purpose of investing or directing clean energy programs and investments. So next slide. After a lot of deliberation and discussion, the Climate Justice Working Group decided to use the low income definition of at or below 60% of the state median income. And so that actually helped to kind of align with publicly administered programs and also minimize documentation, such as they could use SNAP, different individuals could use SNAP or other different assistance programs and show that they met that criteria. Next slide. Okay, so before we go too far into this, any questions about all the past things? Just wanted to refresh everyone's memory. Okay, so one thing, last time when we were voting on things, this is what I'm going to call the V1 of the disadvantaged criteria, the DAC criteria that we're using here. It was based on 2010 tracts. We, at the time, when we started this process, didn't have the 2020 census tracts. And then we also, through the process, when we got the 2020 census tract definitions, had some questions as to whether they were going to be accurate or not based on some of the fear and non-response bias. And so we wanted to wait to move things to 2020 census tracts until we knew what was going on. And through a study with New York State, overall, this is, okay. The 2020 census tracts are pretty good. So I wanted to mention that now it's 2024 and we should really be moving to the 2020 census tracts now that we know that there isn't any bias in them. So to that end, a lot of the work that we have been doing in Ellume and getting the different agencies to do is to shift this. It's not necessarily a non-trivial thing, but we're doing it. So what that means here is if you look at the 2010 census tracts, there were 4,918. In 2020, there are 5,411. That's a 10% increase in census tracts. So a lot of things got divided up, which is kind of indicative of increased population in those census tracts. So next slide. Okay, so here's the thing. Geography's kind of changed for some of these, right? As you start to split them up. You still have the same New York State boundary line, so how did you get 10% more census tracts? For the most part, and this is like almost all the cases, from 2010 to 2020, nothing changed. So the left being 2010, the boundaries 2020, most of them stayed the same. So that's good. That's really, really good. But I wanted to talk through a couple of the other census tracts because there are quite a few cases where, because of an increase in population, those census tracts got popped open and basically divided. So now on the right-hand side, you see those red dotted lines. That means that now there are 4 tracks where there used to be 2. So there's 1, basically there's 4 there. And so that means that we have to take the data we have and update it so that from those 2 tracks into those 4. Next slide. There are a few cases where actually there's some population loss, and in which case 2 tracks got blended together into 1 track. So on the left, there's 2 tracks. On the right now for 2020, there is 1 track. This is not hugely happening a lot, but it's there. Next slide. And here's the crazy one. This is only a few exceptions, but it kind of can do our head in analytically. This is where the geography actually just changes. So on the left, you've got, say in that kind of yellow range, you've got those 2 main tracks there. What happened here is that it actually split into 3. And so to split it into 3, they had to change the boundary of that middle track. So now it's running vertically rather than horizontally. And that means computationally, as we move things across, we have to kind of keep that in mind. Okay, so those are just so that you understand that there's some complexities here. Next slide. What that means is, for the old tracks, those old examples that we had before, we had, say, these designations. On the top one, the left side was a DAC, and then on the right, it was not a DAC. Well, now, when they split, we take the information and try to split it based on the geography there, and now can reassess to say, okay, well, the top 2 now on the left are DACs, and the top right 2, or the 2 right ones, are not DACs. When they're combined, you're combining the data, and then all of a sudden something became not a DAC. And when you're looking at the crazy exception at the bottom, the top was a DAC, the bottom was not. And now all of a sudden we've kind of got a split from vertical where something was still a DAC based on the data for that region. And then the top right became a DAC, but the middle one is not. Fun times. Any questions on this? I know it's kind of a weird thing to go over. Okay, next slide. So one thing I will say, though, that made me feel a lot better about this, because we did have to do some kind of crosswalking of using the shapes of like trying to take a weighted average of a certain geography. And some of this is something that we're waiting to update. So we're still waiting on a few data points. But for the most part, what made me like have a nice sanity check is there was an increase, a 10% increase in DACs or in tracks overall, in census tracts. There's also a 10% increase in DACs overall. So it's not like we're going haywire here. The version that you will see that had exactly the data from before that you all voted on, but is now just on 2020 DACs, is aligning very, very similarly to what we saw with the 2010 DACs. And this will be, as we start deliberating across the next couple months, this will be our foundational thing. So V1 on 2020 tracks is what you're going to be hearing from me as kind of like, that's our version, that's our foundation. That's what you all voted on last time. We just updated the census tracks. So then we can start talking about different data. But I want to go into a few details about some of the data we're still waiting for before we can feel 100% confident in this update. So next slide. Okay. Updating the data. Most of the indicators have refreshed data with 2020 tracks. A lot of our data are based on census, and all of those we could pull and update the data really, really easily. We were also able to update and refresh some of the old data that DOH and other places had. So we're working with those as well. But there are still 10 indicators that we're using as placeholders now, and we kind of use this crosswalk for those 10 indicators. So let me go through those so that you're aware of what they are. Next slide. So for the draft ones, we're using draft data here. There are 6 DOH indicators that we're using this crosswalk, which is we're kind of overlaying the 2010 and the 2020 census tracts and using this kind of like geography weighted mean to redistribute things. But what we're hoping for is that in August, we can get updated data so we don't have to do that for asthma, heart attacks, COPD, and for diabetes. And birth weight, low birth weight, and premature deaths we're still waiting on. We're not quite sure exactly when that will be. Then we're also redoing based on, now that we have these different geographies, we have to redo the GIS work for 4 different indicators. And those are inland flooding, coastal flooding, truck traffic, and driving time to hospitals. And so those are currently what we're doing for those. Any questions? We're hoping to get those in August as well. Okay, next slide. There are 2 indicators that we haven't been able to find in any kind of updated way on 2020 tracks. So the benzene air concentration, we got refreshed data, but they were still on 2010 tracks. So we're kind of stuck with using our own crosswalk to work with those data, even if they're refreshed and updated data. Then we've got the projected days above 90 degrees Fahrenheit. We're still using the same data, and we've used the crosswalk to transfer it. The projected days above 90 degrees Fahrenheit, I think, is probably the safest one to leave as old data, considering it's projected into the future. So we're okay there. I'm less worried about that. Next slide. We do have diabetes data now, and we were able to take the data, update it for 2020 tracks, and, well, we will get those, but we're really excited that we have it. And we were able to run some correlations and different stats for it. It is highly correlated with asthma, low birth weight, percent Black population, premature deaths, 80% AMI, and single parent households. It will reside under the health factor, so it will be combined with asthma, COPD, households with disabilities, premature death, heart attack, population without health insurance, population over 65, and low birth weight. And then you can see on the right, this is a histogram, which basically kind of divides in New York City versus rest of the state. New York City is pink, and the prevalence of diabetes is higher in New York City than it is in the rest of the state. And you can see that by the pink peeking out outside of the blue there. Those are higher counts per census tract. And I think that's it. Next slide. Okay, so Oliver, I think I'm handing this over to you now. But before that, I want to open it up for questions. Any thoughts on this crazy update that we've been doing?
Quick question. Are there updated maps?
There will be, and we figured we wouldn't have time today, but we will provide the updated maps, and we're going to do the same kind of Tableau thing where we're going through and looking through those. Definitely. Yeah. And by the way, we didn't have diabetes in the voted on thing, but it was something that was like, very, very important for the working group. So we can add that in and you can see what it looks like with diabetes versus not. But I think, the discussion last time, as I remember, was that we were definitely going to include diabetes. So we can look at that and then also start thinking about other things, refining the DAC criteria to be exact. Any other questions?
Yeah, Alex, this is Sonal. Given the 10% increase from 2010 to 2020, is there a population increase that you're seeing and numbers of people that are covered under DACs?
Yes. Well, I think proportionally the same, but yes, there is a population increase that is now covered under DACs as well.
Okay.
But still the same proportion as all of the New York State population.
And that's because we've selected a percentile to be included, and that's how it remained at 35%.
We fixed it at 35%. So you all voted on 35%. So when we updated everything, we kind of worked it out so that the numbers would always hit at 35% for, the overall. So the math works out quite well, that it's a 10% increase. And it's the fact that census tracts are pseudo population balanced. I mean, there's a lot of variability between them, but the fact that those splits all happen to balance out the population, it's about the same coverage proportionally still, because the population increased in New York State, there are more people that are covered under DAX than before.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I mean, we'll get the maps next time we meet, and hopefully beforehand so that you can take a look at them and be prepared. I don't want to release all the maps until we've gotten those, some of those updated data points.
Can you all hear me?
Mm-hmm.
This is Jill. I don't know if you can see me. Sorry that I was late. Thanks for this presentation, Alex. It sounds like a tremendous amount of work. And really interesting, and thank you for the breakdown of how the census tracts were split up. And I understand that because the population went up, proportionally we'll have more individuals covered by DAX. I'm curious, once those maps come out though, if those are all the same people as before and how that transitions. So thank you.
Yeah. And Jill, I'll say this, I think más o menos they're the same, because we've tried to keep everything as equal as possible with this kind of V1, right? With the refresh data, but some things have shifted, right? Because the data have shifted, the census kind of movement has shifted. So I think we will next time make sure that we have some of those shifts, this compare and contrast between what we voted on last time and this time with the updated refresh data. And it's not just because the geography's changed, but also because we were able to access, 2023 census data for a lot of it. And that really helps to keep it fresh and updated. And I gotta say, it's been a whirlwind of the last few years, right? So every year stuff is changing quite a lot demographically. Any other final questions? Okie dokie. I'll hand it over to Oliver.
Alex, one more question, and maybe this is more a question for Alana or someone else. When we have these new maps and with all the data, like what does implementation look like? And what's time frame for that?
That was a good question.
So we'll definitely get into what the time frame sort of looks like as we move forward. What it basically looks like for implementation. As I think I've stated previously, obviously the goal is to make sure that we are voting and finalizing the criteria so agencies and entities have an opportunity to actually add any changes or make any changes in any of their policies, or if they've done regulations to make those changes. But are you looking for, what exactly are you looking for, Abby? Are you wondering?
So what I'm thinking about is how this might impact programs and people's eligibility to take advantage of incentives that may be out there or whatever. So I'm wondering if we need to bake in a window between when the change is announced and when the change is implemented,
Right.
or to grandfather in certain program or like projects that are already in the pipeline or whatever it might be.
No, that's an interesting point. I know that the goal is obviously we want to make sure that we're voting before the first quarter, so folks have an opportunity to sort of add this, but that's something that we can definitely discuss and come back to see if there's anything that we can do to make sure that anyone who might have been in a DAC previously and then maybe finds themselves outside of it, even though they've been a part of a program, doesn't find themselves now without service. So let's take that back and have that conversation. Thanks, Abby.
This is Jill. I just also want to express my concern for how this will be implemented. implementation in general, since we've started this conversation, has been on the top of my radar. And I know I've mentioned that I'm in a lot of those conversations around how programs and policies are being designed. And in my opinion, it seems like there may be a divide. I mean, it's not our job, right? Like, our job as the Climate Justice Working Group is to establish the criteria, and that's about it. But I think it's important to understand the implications of the criteria when we're making it, and for the people making the programs and the policies to understand that our hands are kind of tied. But I do think that a more collaboration and maybe continued conversation around this would be very helpful.
Thanks, Jill.
I do want to say, I think that's part of the definition and the criteria as well. Like, you're all deliberating on the timeliness or the amount of refresh of things. I will admit that I think this one is a bigger one in the sense because we really did need to shift to 2020 census tracts, and that meant all this load of work. But it, in my view, kind of as the scientist, that like it had to happen. We couldn't put it off any longer. But from now on, then we can start thinking about what you're saying, which is trying to level out. And this is something that was definitely discussed last couple times, which was how often do we refresh the data? Are there big years? Are there small years of updates? Things like that. So that I think is something worth discussing. Yeah. Okay, so we've moved now from 2010 to 2020 census tracts, and we're updating the data. Now Oliver is going to kind of go over some ideas that DEC had for refining the DAC criteria.
Hello, everyone. Again, my name is Oliver Riley. I'm a climate policy analyst with the Office of Environmental Justice with DEC. I started in February, and next slide, please. And one of the first things that I was asked to do when I came on board was to review the entire process of the Climate Justice Working Group developing the finalized DAC criteria and to identify any anomalies or irregularities in the methodology, and also to go through the entire catalog of all the indicators that y'all ever considered, and to try to identify what indicators you may be interested to see more of in the future. Through that review, I identified two methodological inconsistencies in the maps, and I wanted to present them to you today to see if and how they should be addressed. They include two items. The first is how we map landfills, and the second is how proximity to environmental hazards is measured. Next slide, please. So currently, landfills are mapped as a point on a map, and then there's a proximate area of 500 meters surrounding that point. This is usually mapped basically where the mailbox is for that landfill, and the 500 meters forms a circle around that point. And this method has a shortcoming in that it can fail to capture the magnitude of those facilities on their landscape and the surrounding communities. And going forward, we would recommend that these sites be mapped as polygons rather than points to better capture the size of them. Next slide, please. So this is an example of a landfill. The green dot represents effectively where the mailbox is, and the red circle around it is that 500-meter area. You can see, based on this mapping, the two shades of green represent the two different census tracts. So this proximate area occupies fully within one census tract and is close to the border of another. Next slide, please. This is the actual size of that landfill highlighted in blue. As you can see, the facility is much larger than the 500 meters surrounding the point. The proximate area is described by the pink line, and we can see that this would impact 3 census tracts rather than just the one described in version 1. So the proximate area when it's just the point is about 3/4 of a square mile, and then the proximate area when we take into consideration all of the properties that are being utilized for this landfill is about 5 square miles. So it's a fairly significant impact. I will pause here to see if there's any questions on landfills before I carry on. Hearing none. Next.
I have a question.
Oh, sure.
First of all, this is Jill Hank in Raybrook.
Hi,
Great
Jill. How are
find. Good. How are you?
you? I'm great.
Is this, can you remind me if we're counting active landfills or all landfills, like capped landfills?
So this is just active landfills, to my understanding, and there's about 50 of them in the state.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I'll pause for any more questions before moving forward. All right, next slide, please. So the work that goes into this is fairly complex. There's no automatic way to capture this. The mapping tool that was, or the inventory of landfills that was provided for us by, I believe, Department of Materials Management here at DEC, is that point-based map. And very often these landfills will have a variety of property types associated with them under a variety of different ownerships. So right now we're undertaking work to go through and by hand use satellite imagery, ortho imagery, to check each landfill and determine its actual size. We're about 30% of the way through that work, and we're hoping to have that data available for your deliberation next meeting. Yeah, next slide, please. Going back, oh no, never mind. Sorry, there was another slide in here that we decided not to include. So next, while I was doing this, I went through all of the indicators that were considered in the previous deliberative round and pulled out a couple that I thought might be of interest to the group. These include, well, food deserts was something that the Climate Justice Working Group had considered during the first round, but there wasn't sufficient data available to track it. And we have that data now. It's provided to us through the US EPA, and also noise pollution in proximity to airports, which I'll get into in more detail on the next slide. So this year, New York City provided their New York City Environmental Justice Report, which included a technical supplement in the appendix called the Potential Improvements to the New York State Disadvantage Criteria. It was a fairly robust critique and included several recommendations for changes for the DAC criteria. We reviewed it, and of the changes noted, the two that we thought were actionable and something that we can do today include noise pollution, which is something that the Climate Justice Working Group had previously considered, but didn't have robust data available at the time. And one of the things that the New York City EJ report pulled out was proximity to non-residential census tracts, such as parks and airports. And in developing, in working up the noise pollution data, I think we've got an opportunity to at least track proximity to airports. So I want to present that to you today. Next slide. So as I said previously, noise pollution was originally considered by the Climate Justice Working Group and was not pursued due to lack of data. The New York City EJ report recommends including noise pollution, and that data is available through the Federal Department of Transportation. The data is based on modeling, not actual data capture, so it does have some limitations, but it's based on modeling on a 30-meter grid. And it's broken out by 3 categories: road, rail, and aviation. And we have already spatially joined that to the 2020 census map. Next slide. So here are some example maps of what noise pollution looks like in New York State. I pulled out 2 cities for a zoom in: Rochester, my hometown, and New York City. As you can see from this map, noise pollution occurs everywhere in the state and is something that every citizen of New York deals with on a daily basis. It is certainly more exacerbated in our urban areas and along our highway corridors, but I think that this is something that could really be useful to the working group. Next slide, please. And in doing so, because aviation noise is isolated, we can effectively identify the census tracts that are impacted by proximity to an airport. This jumped out at me because I was seeing that there was effectively the shapes of the runways projected in the mapping, and I thought that was really cool. And when I dug into it, I realized that we had a really good handle here for capturing an analog for proximity to airports. Again, we see New York City here, the state as a whole, and Rochester, New York. Next slide, please. Food deserts. This one's a little trickier. So food deserts was, again, something that the Climate Justice Working Group considered, but was not pursued due to lack of data. The data now exists through the USDA, but it is based on the 2010 census tracts and needs updating. The main thing is that the way that the USDA defines a food store is not consistent with lived experience. So it includes things like pet food manufacturers and slaughterhouses, wineries and cideries and breweries. There's a lot of different facilities that they are flagging as a food store, which I don't know is really consistent with what people would expect when you say food store. So that will be something that the Climate Justice Working Group, should they decide to explore this further, we'll have to deliberate on how we are defining a food store, and then we can mock that up from there. Next slide, please. So this concludes my portion of the show, and I'm going to hand things back to Alex. Before I do so, does anybody have any questions about anything that I presented? I'll be happy to answer them.
Hi, Oliver. Oh, go ahead. Sorry for you.
Okay, thanks, Abby. I'm wondering about the other recommendations that the city made in their EJ report, and if there's a reason why you, like, the ones that you've mentioned here are the ones you're mentioning, and why some of the other ones you kind of left off.
Some of them, we just don't have good data right now to work up. You know, within this iterative cycle, I only wanted to present to you things that were operational now. And some of them were not necessarily applicable to the entire state. So things like pluvial flooding is obviously of great interest, and New York City has a great data set for that for the city, but we don't have pluvial flooding data statewide. And it's really going to be most impacted on primarily urban areas, which, while we certainly need to consider those areas, I was looking for things that were applicable kind of universally. But if there's more interest in the recommendations that the New York City EJ report made, you know, we can certainly dig into that in greater depth later.
Thanks. I think it just maybe is just begs a bigger question around, like, how do we ethically think about the host of issues that New York City has that maybe has the data, or New York, the rest of the state isn't as concerned with, and what is our role to kind of consider those elements here as we kind of think about how the definition's been working. So I think that's maybe a bigger question to open up and talk about.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much for your work on this, Oliver. This is just really interesting and informative, and like the landfill thing, whoa, duh, in a way, like we should extend that up. But my actual question is regarding noise pollution. You know, on the map, it does look like it is pretty spread throughout the state, which intuitively doesn't make sense to me. You know, thinking about the difference between a lived experience, I guess, in an urban community versus a rural community. So I'm wondering if you can speak more to what's even included in noise pollution and how they determine that. And, you know, what I am thinking about is, could it potentially if we were to include it, really skew things toward urban areas.
So the methodology that they use is fairly complex, but my understanding of it is that it is a model, not actual data capture of transportation corridors and the expected noise pollution that occurs there. They set a threshold of 40 decibels, so anything below 40 decibels was not included. 40 decibels being the noise of a library or a normal conversation. It's pretty quiet. And so it's projected on like a 30-meter grid, so like a field of points where each point captured is an anticipated amount of decibels over a 24-hour period when the weather is 65 degrees and calm, and with no consideration for snow or anything like that. So there are certainly limitations to the way that this data is useful to us, but I don't know if it would necessarily skew super hard towards urban areas. There are certainly urban areas that experience a tremendous amount of noise pollution, but when you think about highway corridors and things like that, they're still going to create a tremendous amount of noise pollution in rural areas as well. So it's something that I'm happy to get into deeper with y'all as we move forward through this process. But I think that's like the 30,000-foot view of this data and how it was developed.
Thank you.
Abby, I'll add, I think that, Oliver, correct me if I'm wrong, it includes road traffic, railway, and airport as the three inputs on that. And so when they're modeling that, they're basically taking the roads and modeling how busy that road is, that kind of thing, or the railway or the airports. That's actually why it's actually a really good measure for airports, proximity to airports, because it literally is using the airport information to model it. So it's not like people went out and measured things. And so I think that might be part of it. But I think Oliver's absolutely right. You know, highway is going to be loud, especially if it's trafficy. And rail cars are loud.
Yeah. Are there any other questions? Oh, go ahead, Jill. I'm sorry.
That's okay. What size airports are we considering here?
So this data only captured airports of a certain magnitude. I don't recall the threshold off the top of my head. There are many more airports than were captured by this data, and we do have an inventory of all airports in the state, but that would include everything ranging from, like, you know, the rural airports where a crop duster is going to take off to take care of a field, to, you know, someone's backyard helipad. So this is limited to the largest airports in the state, but if there's interest in exploring the small ones as well, we certainly can do that.
So the criteria for the noise pollution airport size is different than our criteria for the airports that we're measuring proximity in our criteria as it stands now.
So right now we're not measuring noise pollution at all in the DAC indicator, in the DAC criteria. Correct me if I'm wrong on that.
And we're also not doing proximity to airports. That was deliberated and discussed, but we didn't have data that were good enough before.
And the proximity to airports data is based directly on the noise pollution created by airports. It's not, we don't have a good, like, direct way to say, oh, you're impacted by being directly next to an airport, but this noise pollution data kind of provides a window into that because it's tracking aviation data individually. So once we got that aviation data and spatially joined it to the census tracts, the 2020 census tracts, we could pin exactly how many decibels of aviation noise pollution were occurring in every census tract in the state. So that's the methodology behind it. It's not perfect, but it's I think it's pretty good.
Okay, thank you.
one last pause for questions before I hand it back to Alex. Great. Thank you all for your time. I'm looking forward to working with everyone. Alex, it's all yours.
Thank you. So we talked about those different indicators that DC had been reviewing and thinking about, but I also wanted to open it up and talk to you all. Is there something that in this past year that you've been wanting to add or subtract or change? I think it's really important that we start talking about them now so that we can kind of start modeling and preparing those data and seeing whether it's feasible or not. So, I mean, this is not the only time, but please let me know if there's something you've been thinking about and want to talk through.
Alex, can you just remind me what we have in there already related to industrial agriculture?
Yes. So whoever's sharing, if you can go all the way back to the kind of not blue slide. So basically the first slide of content, we can look at the environmental indicators. And by the way, we have like 45 indicators, right? So every time we add something, we're diluting the decision making and impact of each individual indicator in that bucket. So I'm all for adding things, but we should start thinking about parsimony as well.
So I see agricultural land there,
Mhm.
which doesn't, is there a way to, is that just agricultural land period? Or does it give us an ability to distinguish between agricultural land that is being tended in a very environmentally friendly way versus agricultural land that is not?
It is not, we are not able to distinguish that because it is focused on, is it agricultural versus, you know, commercial or something like that, right? So are you trying to get at the idea of, say, added chemicals, forever chemicals, things like that?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think we should make note, and Emily, I'm just internally for our team, we should start looking at some of the methodology then for those chemical sites, the regulated management plan versus agricultural stuff. I think that's going to be really hard to try to identify and look through anything consistent statewide, but we'll look at it. Yeah. Any other thoughts on additions, subtractions, changes to methods?
Jill here again. My biggest thing was the 2020 census data, so thanks. And this isn't anything for you, Alex, or Loom, and this is nothing new to anybody because I know I've said it before, but I've encountered a lot of different interpretations of how we should be evaluating and weighing the low income criteria in our programs and policies. And I realized that, again, we are creating the criteria, but with our other state agencies and partners, I think that there is a barrier there. I'm not sure what we can do, but I'm just putting that out there again.
So I want to go a little deeper with that. Is it that the selection or the individual criteria is hard to kind of prove or show, or that people are interpreting it differently?
A good example is the NYSERDA's workforce development is subsidizing BPI training, and they're subsidizing it for contractors who live within disadvantaged communities. So in the North Country, we have a lot more low-income households outside of disadvantaged communities, and those contractors are not eligible because of how these programs are being written, because I think that they are not interpreting our criteria the same way that I am.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And I've told them that too. I'm telling everybody. And I'm encouraging everybody to change how they're writing their programs and policies. But I think it's important to mention here also.
Yeah, I think it's really important. And it's also something as we create this criteria and policy to be thinking through those implementation, implications throughout the state. So yeah, I think what we can't, you're right, the Loom can't do much about it, but I think that there is something that we can do is have a facilitated conversation about how to think through what this could be and what this could look like. This is Maple Bacon Zelda. I have a 9-year-old. Anybody else on what to add?
Hi, Dr. Dunn. This is Rawa. I'm so sorry that I joined late. I've heard just a piece of the last presentation. But my question really is twofold. One is, are you going to do another sort of schematic of if we add new criteria points and we take away others that maybe don't get us to like, are we going to do some ground truthing around that? That would be really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And then my second question, I don't know if it's really directed at you as it is maybe our state agency folks, is, having been part of the Climate Justice Working Group for, 4 years now, 3.5 years? These exercises take up a lot of our time, and I love being part of these conversations and where we've gotten to so far. I think my problem and my frustration, honestly, is that we have a climate legislation that is the law, yet all the other things that would make the work of the Climate Justice Working Group real can't happen because no other legislation is moving, and that's from the governor on down. And so what are the state agencies doing about that? Because it would, I think, make their jobs a lot easier to implement what the work that we are currently doing as part of the Climate Justice Working Group. But if these other legislative bills aren't going to pass and we're just going to keep, year over year, just doing these exercises to do them, but actually not implement them, then what is the reason for us even continuing to exist?
So, hi, Rawa. Unfortunately, we really can't comment on any pending legislation. That's just not the role that state agencies or entities can play. We can definitely take your concerns back and have conversations with folks internally, with folks at DEC, and have with some of our partners and other agencies. But as for specific legislation or kind of general, we kind of really can't comment on that.
Yeah, thanks for that, Alana. I get it. But what I'm saying is, does DEC currently feel confident that what we are doing with the Climate Justice Working Group is actually going to be implemented? That's my question, I guess.
Well, I can definitely answer that. I feel very confident that we can implement the work of the Climate Justice Working Group. Obviously, this review is occurring rather close to when we first finalize the criteria. And we do have to determine, how often that is going to happen. Obviously, if we're in a constant state of updating the criteria, we're not actually going to be able to see any of this get implemented. And since we are dealing with something that is very new to us, it's new to every single state agency, there are going to definitely be some hiccups and bumps along the way. We're in the process of making sure that there is guidance out for agencies, especially when it comes to the 35-40% of the renewable energy efficiency spending and investments. And when it comes to implementing other issues, such as, how it looks when it comes to permitting or other ministerial items, we are working on how that works at DEC, and hopefully that can be a model for other state agencies as well.
Okay, well, I would love to actually dig in a little bit more into that at another meeting. And then I think the other thing that I would like to address is the affordability piece, because, what we're hearing on the ground from everyday constituents is they don't have the funds to make the transition. They think that, they're getting obviously a lot of robocalls from certain industries that their bills are going to go up. It just feels like a little bit of a challenging situation that I would love to figure out what the solutions are, and to honestly be able to talk to folks on the ground to say, this is the path forward and this is how it will be affordable and possible for low income folks.
Rawa, it's great to hear your voice. And I think, so I've heard from, I think, multiple of you all now about kind of wanting to understand a little bit more about the implementation, the changes and those kinds of things. So I think we will endeavor to have that conversation as much as we can. But I do want to also add, you had asked about the ground truthing and the maps, and we're definitely going to do that. Right now, as we move to the 2020 census data, we're waiting on a couple of pieces of information, but we will have maps. We've been tinkering with them, but I didn't want to show you until they were like feeling like a little bit more certain as far as the data updates and what we've got. And as far as ground truthing, I think it's really important that we do it. And I think it's really important that we also rigorously kind of come up with, I love the maps too. And I also want to introduce you eventually throughout this, the team that we have now, which is just this amazing team that are building these maps in a much more flexible fashion. But enough about the awesome team. I want us to rigorously go through all of New York State. I mean, like, we can't go through everything, but what we need to do is make sure that in our ground truthing, we're looking at the statistics and the information that we can help us make the decisions about what to include and how to include it, and not just in kind of specific places where you all represent, but then also in other areas as well. So throughout this process, we're also going to have to be flexible on what information you need to be able to kind of make that compare and contrast for that ground truthing as well. Okay, so we don't have a lot of you here yet, so I'm hoping that next time we get a quorum and we can really dig into some of this and really deliberate on it. But I do want to constantly be asking about the methods, about things you want to add. I think it's really important that we each kind of get a chance to voice all of those, so that we have time to think through them. So any other final thoughts? We've discussed kind of looking through agricultural kind of pollutions, I would say, chemical use, things like that. So we'll look into that. And then there was more discussion about, well, that was about the only one for addition, but other questions as well as far as implementation. Anything else that you want us to take back and kind of tinker with?
Just want to uplift what I had said before, but I think maybe just formally put it up as a thing to discuss is like the New York City versus the rest of the state proportion. I mean, I'll say as a New York City rep, I've heard a lot of concerns from lots of neighborhoods in New York City about this. And I think that it deserves the respect to like talk about it and talk about how we made that decision and if we need to be rethinking that. So I'd like to nominate that for a formal conversation.
Yep, we'll definitely do that. So we'll set up the map so that we can tinker with like a toggle between having the combined part versus just the kind of full state breakdown. And then we can talk about what that can look like. I have a feeling it will be a spirited conversation in a good way. Okay, so as we continue on as far as next steps for us, we will set up the maps to do this kind of more rigorous and full statewide ground truthing. We'll look into the environmental agricultural potential things. We will set up the maps also to look at rest of state versus like full state breakdown so you can toggle between that. We're also going to set up a toggle so that you can see what diabetes adds changes. I'm also going to show a bit of a study as far as the leverage points. So we have 45, 46 indicators with diabetes into things now, which means that certain indicators have a lot of weight into the definition. Some don't, and some have very, very little. As we consider adding and taking away things, I want you to be aware of kind of those leverage, like the big levers versus the small levers, etc. So you're aware of that. And then we work with Oliver and the DEC to kind of think about the different changes to the landfills and noise pollution and proximity to airport. Anything I forgot? It's nice to see you guys again. Glad we're starting this again. I'm gonna hand it back over to Alana.
Thanks, Alex. Next slide. So now that we are stepping into this process of really reviewing the criteria and hopefully next time actually deliberating on some of the issues and talking a lot of this out, we would like to have give an opportunity for folks, members of the public, if they would like to submit some suggestions on improvements that we might consider during this process. We will work to have something a little bit more formal sent out in the coming days, but for now, for folks who are listening in or in the room, members of the public, if you want to submit any suggestions that you might or input on the criteria, we will take them until August 20th of 2024. So you can send those to the DAC comments at dec.ny.gov. That was the same comment email address that we used during the draft criteria for the public comment period. So we'll use that again for this as well. And if you would please use DAC annual review in the subject line, just so we can make sure that we're differentiating. Obviously the dates will help, but I want to make sure that there's a visual differentiation between different comments. Next slide. So as for next steps, as everybody is aware, due to availability of certain data, we were forced to shift our meeting dates. So I sent everybody a doodle poll to identify dates in September for our next actual deliberative meeting of the Climate Justice Working Group. So if everyone could please go into their email addresses and please submit that poll, that would be really helpful. I want to make sure that we have quorum so that we could actually do some legitimate deliberation next time. Moving forward, the goal is to continue this discussion and begin these deliberations on the recommendations that we noted and that we presented today, and also have those discussions about some of the items that were brought up from folks. We want to discuss any additional, related topics that working group members also want to have added to the agenda. So please feel free to email me if there was something that you either didn't feel comfortable saying now, or if there's something that pops into your head later on, please send that directly to me. We'll make sure that we add that to the agenda. So the goal will be to have a meeting in September. As you'll see by the dates, that avoids Climate Week, so that shouldn't be a conflict at all or in conflicts with Labor Day. Following that, we will look to, in October, the technical team is going to share the technical packet with the Climate Justice Working Group members, and that's going to include the recommended changes to the criteria and any associated impacts. Obviously, a summary of the recommendations that the public made, any other additional comments or questions that the working group has, anything that you guys also, that's all going to be in there. And then also assessment of any additional recommendations that you guys have made. So that will be sent to you in October. We're going to keep the date for our November meeting that I scheduled earlier this year. And then at that meeting, the goal will be to discuss the actual contents of the packet. We're going to give you some time to look it over, actually absorb it, and come back with questions and things that you really want to dive deeper into. We're going to facilitate that further discussion and deliberation on the criteria and the recommendations that we've raised. And we definitely want to discuss the recommendations and anything that's raised by the public as well. So just also to make sure that we're clear, in addition to that work and the deliberative work that we're going to be doing on the disadvantaged communities criteria, in accordance with the Climate Act and with other pieces of legislation that have come out subsequently after the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, we're going to consult on the continued efforts of the air monitoring program. Also, so Division of Air Resources is looking to provide us with an update. They are available on that Tuesday, August 20th date. So that will, while that won't be an official meeting of the Climate Justice Working Group, if we do have a quorum, that would be a great opportunity to sort of vote on some things, continue some of those deliberations, and then also have that conversation on the community air monitoring. So while it's probably not going to be a deliberative or voting meeting, since we didn't really deliberate or vote today, we could take some of that time to maybe at the end to have some of those conversations so we can prepare for October. Does anybody have any questions or concerns, comments on anything that I just said?
I don't have any concerns on what you just said. I do have a question though.
Sure.
Well, first, thank you for the opportunity for people to submit public comments. And I'll look for that more formal email to spread on our networks. But my question is if there's been any more effort to replace Jonathan for the rural representative on the Climate Justice Working Group?
Yes, and actually that brings up another issue. Mary Beth McEwen, who was our other rural representative for the Climate Justice Working Group, has also resigned. So we are in the position of needing to replace 2 rural representatives for the Climate Justice Working Group. The process is taking a little bit longer than, we'd like, but we are definitely, if folks have any additional suggestions for folks who represent rural communities, specifically rural environmental justice communities or disadvantaged communities throughout the state, please send those recommendations to me, especially if they're interested. Don't send them if they're not really interested in doing this work. But if anybody has any suggestions for folks who are interested in joining the Climate Justice Working Group and assisting us through this process, that would be extremely helpful. We really do need to have a quorum for this, and the quorum number doesn't change with the number of working group members that are active. So we still have to have 7, and technically we really do have to have 13 to do what we're doing. So like I said, if anybody has any suggestions, if there's anybody who is listening in on this, who knows of folks who are rural representatives for disadvantaged communities or environmental justice communities who would be interested in helping us out and working with us, please send those along to me. You can send it to justice@dec.ny.gov, and we will review those people and those suggestions. Thanks, Jill.
Yeah, and maybe I can email you after, but it would be helpful to have something in writing to be able to provide to people who might be interested.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, if we could talk about that offline, that'd be helpful. Thank you.
Sure. All right. Are there any other questions, comments, or concerns that folks have before we close things out for today? All right. Well, thanks everyone for jumping on. I know that we didn't have nearly as many folks here today, but we did have some people who are out because of illness, and that can't always be helped. Hopefully we will be able to have a full quorum for September and even in August if we can possibly get everyone together so we can discuss the results of the community air monitoring and further efforts on mitigation and mitigation suggestions. Again, as always, if you have any questions or concerns or comments or any other issues that you want to bring up, please feel free to email me and reach out to me. And we will see you again in September, but hopefully August. Thanks, everyone.